out of the experience. It's also something you're likely going to need when you're asking your letter writers for a letter of recommendation. And for the January, February of the year you're going to be applying, you are going to be requesting your letters of rec, and you do have your CV together. And that really just includes all the the key experiences you've had towards preparing yourself for medical school to be a complete applicant.
Now with the CV, during undergrad, you're going to have a whole bunch of things that you've done most likely, right? Volunteering in the hospital, whether it be research, whether it be being a part of a student group or coming to meetings like this. There's a lot of things on there. Make it as easy as possible on your professors. Don't write like a huge paragraph for every single activity and expect them to read through it. Some of them may not have the time to only skim through it. Some of them will read through it, but then there are going to be so many activities that they're just going to be really tired, and it's not going to flow over as well. So make it as easy as possible. Make it easy on the eyes. If you've ever seen, imagine like giving a professor like an essay to read, and you're having like 10 mini essays to read for every single activity that you've done, right? Do bullet points. That's one of the things that's easy to cut down. Use keywords. You don't have to write full sentences on your resume or your CV. Just make it short and simple, but also include like the thing, if you've been a leader or if you've been like a staff member, emphasize that. So put it in bold or italicize it or highlight it somehow, because a lot of people can be members, but not many less people step up and take leadership roles. So if you do, highlight that.
Yeah, and just a good rule of thumb is to try to keep your CV to a single page. So it's easy to look at, and it will help you really be concise in what you present and really get to the meat of what you're trying to say about yourself as an applicant. So the letters of rec, again, if you have not already asked for for letters of rec before your application year, you want to begin thinking about and asking those who are going to write your letters no later than February of the application year, and to really get a strong letter, it's very important to invest the time to build a relationship with a professor, with a physician you're shadowing, from a PI or organization leader, so that they know you well, and they can write specific things just very specific things you've done that they've seen as something something that they can recommend you to go to school for. And so the general, and some of the things you should do if you're still in undergrad, and you do want to build a strong relationship, is show up to your discussion sections, every discussion section. Be prepared to participate in class, ask questions. Show up to every class. Really let your presence be felt in the class, whether you're talking to the professor afterwards or you're really participating during the class session. Impressions are big, so don't show up late to classes if you can help it. I think being professional is something that professors and people in academia can very easily see. And if you present yourself as a professional, it'll just give you an edge, I think, on the letter of recommendation. It'll make it easier for the professor to write a strong recommendation. Also just make sure you try and endeavor to get at least an A in the class you're going to get. If you're going to get it from a letter from a professor, make sure you get an A in the course. If you can't get an A, things happen. whatever happens, always be just in constant communication with your TAs, GSIs, and professors to openly let them know what's going on, so they at least see your effort. Let them know if anything impeding your ability to contact.
I have a question.
Okay.
So for the non-science letter, I always thought that was for for a humanities class that you took.
Yeah. So non-science. Sorry. So some schools will be very specific about the humanities. Third letter being from humanities professor. So that's definitely true for I think a lot of schools. So. For example, I got a letter from one of my literature professors who I had taken 2 courses with and had gone on a sort of road trip on with. So the non-science professor, I don't know if you know if it's specifically humanities or how it rotates.
So for non-science, it generally can be a variety of professors, but so for instance, I took a class called Medical Narratives. It's kind of like an English humanities class. So I got a letter from that, but I easily could have asked like my Asian American Studies professor as well. The key here with letters of rec is that's one component of your application, right? Every step along the way, you want to make sure that every step is as good as it can be for your application. So with letters of rec, you're only going to have maybe 4 to 6 letters. Or less to tell the admissions, hey, this is your chance for a professor or someone else of high ranking to talk about you, right? Because a lot of this, like your personal statement, your activities, that's all you. That's all you're writing all of that. Your grades, your GPA, all of that, like that's all you. But this is a chance for someone who has been in the field, who has worked for a while, who has strong academic credibility to comment on you as a student. Going off of what Siobhan said, you want a strong letter, so right off the bat, ask them, can you write me a strong letter? Because that gives them a chance to say, if they can't write you a strong letter, then they have a chance to say, I can't write you a strong letter, and then you move on. But you really want every single, because you only have, 4 to 6 letters, you want every one of these letters to be really strong from people who know you pretty well. How many of you have sat in a class, especially like an introductory biology class, where there's like 200 other students? Show of hands. Or 300 or more, right? I mean, that's pretty common. So how do you get to know these people, especially if you go into a public school or, just any big lecture hall in general? Like you're taking a bio class, like regardless if you go to any school, you're gonna have a couple hundred people in that class with you. So how do you stand out? Siobhan mentioned office hours. So not a lot of people generally go to office hours. So that's one way to go to the professor. Like I went to office hours, sometimes I didn't have questions, but I just sat in and listened to the other students' questions, and not only did it help me get to know my professor better, and vice versa, he got to know me better, but you also learn a couple things that you didn't know in the class, right? They'll talk about something that you thought you knew really well, and then all of a sudden, like you realize, hey, I could actually study this a little bit more. So it's useful for not only improving a grade, but also getting to know the professor better. And at the end of the quarter, if you're just a random student in a lecture hall of 200 who got A in the class and you ask the professor for a letter, what are they going to say? They're going to say he's a good student, did well in my class, maybe attended a couple of office hours, and he's a nice person. I think that's a very generic letter. And when I say generic, like that means anyone can write that kind of letter for you. You want to be very specific. Like I saw this student, work with this concept, and over time he struggled at the beginning, but he improved. He went to every single office hours. He was very hardworking, very dedicated to the class, and ended up doing really well in the final. Things like that are going to stand out much more than, oh, he's a good student. So you see how it's a lot more specific when you get to know someone a little bit better, right? That's what you want to shoot for, especially in your classes where it's a little bigger. Another way that I did it, I did honors projects with my professor. So I would ask them, and I was a part of college honors at UCLA, but you don't have to be an honors student you don't have to be a member of the honors program to do these projects. Anyone could have done it. So I literally just walked up to my professor and I asked them, hey, if it was a class, I took a class on sleep-wake cycles for my neuroscience, and I asked him, hey, I'm really interested in Alzheimer's disease. Is there any correlation between sleep-wake dysfunction and Alzheimer's? And I was wondering if you could mentor me through, at UCLA we're on the quarter system, so it's 10 weeks. So throughout the 10 weeks, can you mentor me through this project as I kind of look more about it and write a research paper on it. And I mean, it is a lot of work, but at the same time, it's kind of self-initiated too. Because think about this, if they're teaching 200 other students, and you're the only one, or one of only a handful of students that actually do something extra, right, you're going to stand out a lot. So by doing something like that, you get to know the professor a lot better. They're going to be able to work with you one-on-one. They're going to be able to talk about how you've taken an incentive to do this, because obviously it's not a requirement, right? It's not a requirement of the class, it's something extra. So that's one way that I got to know my professors a lot better. So that's something that you can do too. And if you have any questions on how to approach your professors and that sort of thing, come talk to me afterwards. Yeah, question?
So there's like lab classes that you have TAs for, like the main one's your TA, and the teacher's just like the head.
Right.
Does it matter, or does it affect whether, or do they weigh it any different if it's a TA versus a professor? Because you do get to know your TA a lot better since it's the small lab classes, and the professor just kind of oversees the TA, but they never really interact with you.
Right, so in that case, you generally want a professor writing it, but in that case you can say, hey, you can go to the TA and say, hey, I really enjoy this class, and I feel like I've gotten to know you, kind of well, and I was wondering if you could write me a letter of recommendation, and you can ask the professor to co-sign it, or ask the TA to have the professor co-sign it. So that way the professor's name and signature is at least on there, and they can validate for it. But obviously the TA knows you well, so they can, like the TA will most likely write, a chunk of the letter, and the professor will kind of like look at it and see if it's okay, and if it represents you. Any other questions? So also, as we mentioned, 2 science. So a lot of schools, if you go through their websites when you're applying, a lot of them will say 2 science faculty.